Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Effingham Talks today. Before we get started, we would like to remind everyone to keep Charlie Kirk's wife, children, the rest of his family, and close friends in your thoughts and prayers. Charlie was a great man of Christ first, but he also believed in the First Amendment. And that's something that we should all keep in mind, and his voice is not silenced. His voice has been magnified. So we just want to say again our condolences to the Kirk family, and Charlie, we'll keep up the good fight, man. Today's episode is being broadcasted from Faith Equestrian Center. If you're not familiar with Faith Equestrian Center, you can check them out on Facebook or at their webpage, www.faithetc.org. We'd also like to thank our sponsor for today's show, Handiac LLC. Today on this episode, we have cancer survivor and mayor of Lincoln, Kevin Exley, CEO and president of Southern Choices of the Coast LLC, also president of the Effingham County Kiwanis Club, and retired Lieutenant Colonel Brian Montgomery, who is running for U.S. Congress, Georgia District 1. Thank you for joining us today, guys.
Morning. I'm going to start it off, I reckon.
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm sitting right beside a good friend of mine, Honorable Mayor of Lincoln, Kevin Exley. Kevin, it's amazing. I want to speak upon your cancer and how, and so some of the symptoms first. Number one, I'm your last therapy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And ringing and conquering throat cancer. So he might have to take a break and get some water. When I ask him, what I like to know is what were some of the first signs that you may have something. I think the public doesn't understand some of the signs.
So I was really couldn't tell by the weight loss because I was about 250 pounds, and I started losing some weight, but I thought it was because I was back in the gym and I was trying to do all those things. So I thought, man, this is working. You know, I'm doing great here. And but I had a lingering sore throat, and I got a appointment with my doctor. Went in, see my doctor. He said, Kevin, you might have some old, what do you call it? When you got a bad sore throat, when you got
Scars?
yeah, he said it may be from past, some scar tissue from the past sore throats or anything like that. So he gave me an antibiotic, said in 10 days, if it's not better, then you're going to need to go and get an ultrasound on your. I decided one morning, just for giggles, I was going to go down 204 to work because traffic was so bad on 21. So I went out 204 and I sit in that traffic, and I told myself, I said, if I go by St. Joe's and the emergency room don't look like it's packed, I'm going to go in there and just ask them if they'll do an ultrasound or something and see. And I walked in, there was 2 people in the waiting room, and walked up to the counter. The lady says, we can get you right on back, which is unheard of in an emergency room, at 8 o'clock in the morning. So they took me straight back. Within 45 minutes, I had been told that I had a tumor, like in the back of my throat, and that it was very small. And then the doctor noticed that I already was seeing an oncologist. So luckily for me, not lucky, but 2 years prior, I had a stroke. And the stroke that I had was because I had polycythemia, so my blood was thick. So my blood got thick, the doctor had the wrong phone number and couldn't get in touch with me, and I had a stroke the morning that he got in touch with me. So had a stroke, so I was seeing them for 2 years based off of polycythemia, and all you do is go in and they let blood off of you if your blood gets too thick. So I'd already had an oncologist, so I called her walking out the door, and I said, hey, they're saying I got this tumor in the back of my throat, I need to see you now. And she said, come on in. So I went in there, and she said, Dr. Taylor wants to do all these things to you right now, PET scan, we want to do all this, but first we have to find out what it is. And let's get you set up for a biopsy. So they did the biopsy, and they immediately come back and said, yes, that's what it is. And right now you're between stage 1 and stage 2 because we think that it may have touched your right side lymph nodes. But that's as far as we see it. But the PET scan will tell. So when I went for the PET scan, those doctors they were just so smart. Dr. Pablo, he's Emory bred and the head guy at Summit Cancer Care. He said I'm banking on it being 1 to 2 stage, and it hadn't went anywhere. So I went and did the PET scan, and sure enough, come back, that's what it was. And so I told him, I said, I don't want to wait any length of time. I want to get started now. He said, I can have you on radiation treatments in a week. So a week later, I did my first chemo treatment, which was, they told me going into it, they said, this is going to be the toughest chemo that you will ever go through. This is cisplatin, 280 milligrams. It's the strongest we can give you. And we're going to give it to you every 21 days. So by the time you finish up your radiation, you'll be on your last cisplatin. And after the first one, I was outside working in the yard, and I thought, man, this is really not that tough on me. Maybe I am tougher than what I thought I was. And but the doctor told me going back, he said it's cumulative, so it's going to catch you. And that radiation and that chemo is going to catch you all at once. And I had told him I'm not getting a feeding tube. I don't want a feeding tube. I'll work through it. After the third week, I went 27 days without eating or drinking anything, and that was
that was tough. So at that moment, when you took what you thought was one detour, you was really taking 2.
That's right.
And that, you had your profound eureka moment in taking what you thought was one detour to 204 ended up being the most important detour, I think,
of my life.
Of your life.
That's right.
What an amazing story. There's so many of these symptoms out here that, we just say, guys, we're not going to, we strong.
That's right.
We heat, man. When I seen you at during the July 4th celebration there in the city, y'all done a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
I mean, we had an amazing patriotic time there at the park. I didn't hardly recognize you, and as you well know, my best friend went through throat cancer too. And yes, if the chemo don't get you the radiation, it stays with you. For quite some time, and I commend you on that. And I want to follow it up with, since we've spoken, all the different positive changes that the city has evolved in making tough decisions. We seem to be on a path of continuity and inclusion, not only with the city of Lincoln's citizens, but also know the embracement of the businesses around. And thank you for giving me my business license every year.
That's right.
It's the best one of all I have. and I try to keep my place up and respectful and admirable. And thank y'all for y'all support and give me an opportunity. At times they ask me to build things from y'all from time to time. But thank you for not forgetting me and give me an opportunity to impact, and I hope I don't impress. So thank you for that. Now, what I want to speak upon, the last thing is, we do have this election coming up, and we are all just reeling into the evidence of the non-embracement of the First Amendment. We've seen the Kirk family, we've seen Mr. Charlie Kirk just lose his life over having the ability to exercise his right of the First Amendment. And I want to beseech you to think of something when you speak. Your words and all our words in which we speak have power and influence and destruction. And I beseech you, my friend, to think long and hard as you're about to answer a question or even broadcast your opinion.
Mhm.
Your opinion matters.
Mhm.
Kevin, your dedication matters. What I want to say to the public is our First Amendment is one of our most important rights. But it's a double-edged sword. From the political arena to our homes, to our churches, to our schools, we must, as we listen to an individual, the First Amendment is saying that this person has the right to speak. And I must not only hear, but I must listen to an individual speaking at possibly the top of their lungs, advocating something I would spend a lifetime opposing. And our hardest thing we have to do, especially as men, and if you're a personality guy, it's even harder, is slowing down and listening, not hearing, listening to what you believe is something that you would oppose. And it's okay to be different. It's okay to be challenging. But what I want to say to you as a man of leadership, as you go into the highways and the byways of our city, and as you also go into our state capital, and you go into our county, continue to be a man of integrity. Listen more now than ever before. Charlie Cook was an amazing man, but not everybody agreed with it. Not everybody's going to agree with you. Continue trying to find common ground.
Mhm.
And continue to be a representative for myself, and also the biggest representative is when you represent the people who have no voice. And they feel they have no voice. But every person has a voice, but sometimes they don't have the courage and the boldness to stand up. So thank you for what you're doing for our city. I'm proud that you rang the bell for your freedom,
Right.
the bell to carry your name, and to carry your turn, or how many turns that you have for our great city. That know that you are, and you do set the tone and the pace. I think a mayor has a massive opportunity to set the tone and the pace. So on that, I think I'm excited, I'm grateful, and I'm blessed that you have survived and conquered cancer.
Mhm.
But I want you to continue now, as you have rededicated yourself to a much bigger cause,
Mhm.
that you be that voice, and that you listen, and you reach out to the ones who may not say anything to you, but know that you should be in our prayers as our leader of our great city. And what you have is an immense opportunity to continue impacting, which I know you don't care to impress.
Yeah, well, and you know, Andy, just to add to that, I don't know how many people here or listening can remember the old Bugs Bunny cartoons. But one of the things that you can take from those things is sometimes they have a message. And, you know, one of the messages, there was one in particular that it always go back to it. And it was a sheepdog and a coyote. And every day they walked to work together. They punched the clock. All day long they fought each other. All day long the coyote was trying to get the sheep, and the sheepdog was beating the coyote, and they set traps for each other all day long. Whistle blew at 5 o'clock. They walked over, hit the clock, and then put their arm around each other and went home. That's what the First Amendment is about. That's what, you know, this whole political arena, and that's the one thing that I will tell you that I have learned from this, you know, from having this cancer is grace, and having grace, and you got to have that, and you got to look at people like you said that you do not believe that can help, but you got to find the good in what they say, and you got to find the good in that person, because nobody gets up every day to do the wrong thing when you serve. They just choose to do it a different way. So servants of a city, servants of a nation, they get up every day thinking in their mind, I'm going in there to fight for the people that can't fight for themselves. and they may be different than you are, but that's what they do. So, I've kind of reborn with that theory, and it has worked out well. And I will tell you, having lifelong enemies is not something that I will ever be interested in again. I used to think, I don't really care if that person don't like me. That never will be. Me and Miss Susie Davis didn't speak for years, and when this happened, I found out that she had me on a prayer list at church from somebody that I had worked with 10 or 12 years ago. And I reached out and said, thank you. Because when you're down that far with cancer, when somebody says they're praying for you, they care about you. And once I realized that, I reached out to them, and now it's, she sends me cards weekly. She is an incredible lady, and I can't say any more for her and Pastor Don. And then on top of all that, I've been missing those great sermons that he preaches all the way up, until now. But like I said, today was a great one. My wife enjoyed it, and we're meeting different people in their church that I didn't have the opportunity because I didn't show grace and I was against them. But now I know. So things have changed a lot.
Well, that's all. Every one of us are servants to each other, and you don't have to have a title to be a good leader.
That's right.
I always say, if you gotta have the plaque on the wall, you're a shallow-minded man or woman. And I've had people who come to me and they have their plaques, or their engineering, and they go to college and all those different things. And I have my plaques, but my plaques are not in my office. I keep them in my personal home, because when they come through that door, their ideas, their aspiration, their dreams, their desire to impact our small community, to be one of us in my company. That's the most important thing. Who you are, what you are, where you come from, it doesn't matter. At the door, we all are equal. And if you work for me, you have to understand we must impact. And the last but not least, as we all tomorrow go and earn our money, I used to work in this great America. We got great young people, and they believe we make money in America. You know what? We don't make money in America. We earn our money. We earn our money by increasing our service to others. Let's let our children know that philosophy is theirs for the taking. And it's us who are in leadership, not in a position of authority over another. We are all in this room leaders. And we need to make sure as we move forward in this great America, that our young people start hearing collectively, we believe in them. And yes, we may have some ones that aren't that good, but America's best days lies ahead. It lies ahead with our young people. And with that being said, I'm going to yield the mic back.
Kevin, we want to wish you the best.
Thank you.
Congratulations on ringing the bell.
Yes.
I know that was big, and
Yes.
we hope and pray that this cancer stays away forever. And you never have to deal with it again.
Yes.
We all know cancer sucks. And I hate to see, normally I don't talk like that on here, but when it comes to cancer,
Oh, it does.
it
It's terrible.
sucks.
And when you go there every day, Tommy, and you meet people that are going through it, they're in it way deeper than I was in it. It gives you a different outlook on life, and you look at those people that have faith in God, and they go in there every day trying to heal, and some of them will never heal, but they fight every single day. And so that's just, it's a testament to who people are, how we were built.
I think some of what you're saying too is, it's important that, you have that successful kind of journey, right? But to have faith, have the willingness and strength, and to give people hope. I think that, at the end of the day, yes, cancer is a negative thing, right? It's impacting a lot of people in America, but, I think a lot of people do give up that hope, and, they get frustrated with the process, or even like we talk about insurances and navigating all of that. And I think it's important to know, everyone's in it together, and the power of prayer, as well as, continue to have that strength. So, I applaud what you've been through, and I think hopefully you can help send a message to everyone else who's going through it.
And through the Shriners, those guys are amazing to help kids and do what they do for families. So, there's just so many support groups for cancer out there that you know, like I said, the Shriners is just amazing, and the people that they've impacted and is just, you know, so without that terrible disease, you don't show that grace and that love through programs like the Shriners and those people that.
Have you ever seen the college football games with Iowa, University of Iowa? So they do their football games in the Children's Hospital. A lot of the individuals in the Children's Hospital have cancer. They actually will wave at them, and it's a really cool dynamic. It's pretty powerful. You know, getting to send that message.
Yeah.
Just getting your story. So, unfortunately, my best friend, through school was killed in Iraq in 2006. And at his funeral, I read Romans 5:1-5. And when you look at that and you talk about your faith, right, and that faith allows you to go through immense heartache, obstacles, challenges in your life. But when you do that, it builds who you are and builds your character. And through that, your hope and your salvation in your life going forward. So hearing your story and reflecting on you ringing the bell, and congratulations. But that verse, it stays strong. Normally I have Danny's bracelet on, but I got a different one on today. But that always rings when I hear those stories and I talk about those challenges that, sometimes it's difficult for people to understand why bad things happen to us. But it just builds our strength to continue to be a great person, and you definitely see that in you.
Well, and that's why we have 2.0. We come into this world thinking that we're one thing, and all the way up until just a few months before I got it, I was thinking I was one thing, and then 2.0 hits, and it changes you, and it's changed me for the rest of my life. So it'll be a different me, for the rest of my life, and I appreciate that, because I was okay, but now I just have grace, and I've never had that, so that's important.
Thank you again for coming back. Tyler Dorn, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Thank you for being here, man.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So Tyler, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and why you chose home health, home care?
Yeah, so I've actually been in Georgia now here 8 years. So I was born and raised in Wisconsin originally, actually on a dairy farm. My parents are in their 70s. I don't think they'll ever retire. We talk about kind of those hard-nosed farmers. I mean, my dad is exactly that. We're hoping someday he will go to the doctor, and I think he'll end up outliving everyone. But I think for me, growing up, my mom was in special education. I have a long line of mental health as well as disabilities in my family, and just kind of between kind of the way I was raised and growing up, I lost my brother to suicide 11 years ago. And I actually lost my other little brother to suicide a little over a year ago. So that, bipolar for both of them runs in the family, as well as an intellectual disability for my younger brother. So it's just something that, I was immersed from day one, amongst kind of other lines within my family. But, I think for me, I always wanted to be a clinical psychologist. And that was my plan. That's actually my educational background is in psychology. And I think that my path changed a little bit. We talk about differences, and I share a little bit of just cultural diversity for me. But I lived all around the world in a couple different places. So, for me, I was studying psychology actually in Nairobi, Kenya, and I think that it was eye-opening to experience the concept of the disabled population. We think a lot about what's going on in America and what services are being offered. And I was actually doing a volunteer at an orphanage. And in Swahili, there's the word Mzungu, and it kind of means white European person in Swahili. And it was bizarre to me because you're in this orphanage, and they were coming in for adoption. So it said Mzungu's coming. You line up all the kids, and then you got from basically young age to 17. And when you look down the line, what do you see? You see a lot of older kids with disabilities not getting adopted, right? And I think for me that really kind of changed my outlook in terms of where can I make the biggest difference. And I did do some school psychology work, and I just think from doing like Wechsler's intelligence testing and different things, I was realizing administering this test, you have individuals who have some of the most profound strengths, but because their processing speed was slightly delayed, they could crack a Rubik's Cube in a matter of seconds, yet a simple sentence they couldn't figure out. And it was like, there's an imbalance there. And so, kind of post school and whatnot, I got into kind of independent living residential services in Wisconsin, and did some other abroad work. And I think for me that was kind of my calling. And I think when I was raised on a farm as well as in a Catholic family, we talk a lot about just kind of hating that message of having those differences. Differences are okay. I think embracing those differences can be very powerful for one, not only yourself but also for the other side of it. And I think that you guys have already said a lot about just listen, and I think that that message gets lost. And I think I was excited just to have this opportunity on this platform because. I think it gives me the opportunity to learn and grow from others, but also gives me an opportunity to kind of listen and hear someone else's journey, like what you went through in cancer, Kevin. And I think there's an important message, and what are some of those underlying, having faith, having strength. Since came into Georgia, Pauline Shaw is probably my ride or die for life. I've met her from the beginning, and her and I became not only kind of professional. She's my work wife in a lot of ways, and I think for me, just seeing the passion of what she's went through to advocate, for a loved one for herself, as well as, I was in, a bigger company, and a couple of years ago I branched off, and I realized that there's such a need for those that don't have that voice. So we talk a lot about just, having debates and differences, but there's a lot of people that we serve working with primarily developmental and intellectual disabilities that have a lot of strengths and a lot that you can learn and a lot to bring to the community. And I think for me as an agency, it's how can I bring that out? How can I get involved within the community? How can I get opportunities for some of our individuals that people look past? And some of the things that we do as a company, we're talking about the election coming up, is a lot of people forget that individuals with disabilities have the right to vote. And that's something that we do in education with our staff to teach them, and we usually do it around the fall with what we talk about right and responsibilities for our staff to educate our individuals. And the right to vote is an important thing. A lot of people think, oh, they can't vote. Well, if they don't have a guardian, right, and the guardian can then help guide that step. But I think for just what I do, I'm very passionate, both for personal reasons, but also just the impact that we're making in Effingham County, as well as we've expanded. We do a ton of work throughout Chatham and now down towards Hinesville, Statesboro. We're going into Brunswick, and there's such a need for good providers to provide this service because a lot of families are going unsupported. And I think there's, we talk about just positivity is a lot of kind of buzz going around Medicaid, right? What's happening with Medicaid, et cetera. From my experience with our services, the Department of Behavioral Health is actually putting more people into services, more than I've ever seen in the years I've been here, and I think there's a lot of positivity within there. So, yeah, just in terms of my background, that's why I do what I do. I love what I do, and I think that having kids getting raised in Effingham County, I want to show them and be the role model that I had when I was growing up, both through my mom and the Catholic Church, as well as my father, who's still probably one of the hardest working men I know. I think he'll farm till the day he dies. My grandpa actually died on the farm, and that's just the way they were born and raised. So,
But that's what kept them going.
mm-hmm.
That's really what kept them strong.
I think the one word that your father has, and I believe you have, is passion.
Mm-hmm.
If you're passionate about something, you really never work. As your wife at work, from what you mentioned about Miss Pauline, and she does make a definition of the 3 P's.
Mm-hmm.
She certainly has always had her purpose, knowing her purpose, and she rallies behind her potential. If she doesn't know it, she'll find somebody who does. She'll plug somebody in, and she takes that purpose and potential. She wraps it all together with her passion. And she's like a magnet. You go to her. So I see that in you. I see your passion. So you must have got that from your dad. He's going to stay to him until he finishes.
Yeah, just thinking my family. It's I think being raised on a farm and having to wake up at 5 in the morning, milk cows every day, and then go to school and sports and come back and you're doing chores late at night. I think there's a lot of core values in that. And I think, at times with America, right, we're talking about just, kind of what happened with Charlie. And again, there's that foundational values within, for me, it was the Christian faith, right? And, but I also learned a lot when I was traveling around. I lived in Sri Lanka for some time and just understanding Buddhism, and there's a lot of great core values within that religion. And I think it's not necessarily that there's one box fits all for every person, but what are some of those core values of that positive truth that are really promoting kind of a better humane society?
I noticed this. You mentioned several times behavioral health, mental illness. I'm so glad that America has turned the corner in a direction. I always equate mental illness to a little bit of what diabetes is. It's a chemical imbalance. It gets to where the person needs their medicine, to be able to, to straighten up their vessels, straighten up their shield, and then they don't get it. And then when they get it, they think they're okay, and then they get off of it. Mental health has come front and center. I know I have some friends and I have some family members who fight with that. Some embrace it. Others don't, because of, if you embrace it, that means that now you're going to be taboo. You're going to have an icky box on your forehead. But I believe that's what America used to be. But I believe we're advancing to where we're accepting a person's deficiencies within behavioral health. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually just came back from Colorado. This was about a week and a half ago, and did a suicide prevention walk, actually in collaboration with a brother who's in the U.S. Army. He's been in over 15 years, and he's actually in the medical side, but not only have us personally, we've lost 2 brothers, we've lost a grandfather, an uncle, a cousin, we've lost a lot of people to suicide just in our family, almost like an epidemic, right? And for him, we were doing this walk, and just appreciate you guys' service in terms of to our country, and just in that week alone, he had 15 calls within Fort Parsons, military base with suicide, right? And I think that gets lost with a lot of the violence and negativity happening of the mental health crisis. And I think for me, it's what can I do to impact and be a difference. And you can't solve every problem every day, but it's one conversation, and maybe it is. We get into these debates and it can be very negative. But how can we listen? How can we take something from that conversation to maybe help shape ourselves as well as the other individual you're talking and speaking with? And I think that's a big thing for me, is helping be that platform of there is a lot of negativity at times, but there's a lot of great happening. Not only to the people we serve, and with developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities, there are some awesome stories, and that's what we're trying to do with our social media, is capture that to really shed light. And I know you follow Tommy. We're doing some partnerships with WM artists and moments of a variety of a lot of other things. So
And Miss Pauline reminded me when I was on council before, we did a proclamation for the navigators, and she said something that hit home, and obviously I'm going to take that back with me. Is there's a misconception of what political leaders can actually do. Local politicians can't fix traffic. You know what I mean? There's things that we cannot fix. But she made that point clear a while ago. There are things that you can do, and you can get behind, people with disabilities. And we can get behind that, and we can raise that awareness because we have that platform. And that's the biggest thing that I see that we can do for our community. That should not be a lost group. It should be on the forefront. People that need help should be in the front, not behind, not people that we don't think about. And so thank goodness that Effingham Talks has taken that. What we should have done as a city after we did the proclamation is take that to the next level. And I really appreciate what those guys have done, because I love watching the videos on there, Tommy, that you post, and when the baseball game's going on and everybody's out there. It's amazing. Yeah. And it's something that our community needs to stop talking about and just do it. You know what I mean?
Start engaging. We use this one word for December the 7th, 1941. I'm going to use it for myself. This past January the 11th, a day that will live in infamy, was the day I had the opportunity to hire this part-time student. And so when he came to me, I was told that he had Asperger's, an acute Asperger's. Well, that could be a disability if left to its own and not addressed positively, encouragement. But I say sometimes those acute Asperger's and disabilities that some children have, some of that can be worked out by us who are in leadership to be positive. You know, look at the positive that can come out of it. This young man will finish up this year in high school, and it will probably be one of his best years, because we have to believe in our young people and in these disabilities that some have. I believe he's going to be able to outgrow. I think with encouragement. I think sometimes we put these little definitions on people, or a little tag, and so they start believing, and there is nothing better. And I believe that we are a community, we are a loving community in Effingham County, and I believe in Georgia as a whole. For me, it opened my eyes up to what is asked and required of us. And now we're going to have within, I don't know, 10 months, we're going to have an amazing young man that's going to go out, and there's formal leaders behind him, and he knows that Mr. Andy's got his back, that I believe.
Thank you for doing that.
And you've been to the shop,
Yeah.
and you watched them boys work.
Actually, Andy called me the day he hired that young man. He called me. He was that excited about it. And I texted Miss Pauline and told her about it, because I was excited for him.
Mhm.
You know, I thought that was a great moment.
It was a challenging moment. I was questioning that I did the right thing, and I was so excited. And so that particular Saturday, they were only working on Saturday, and we all like to have Saturdays off, right? Well, I give up my Saturdays, and they work every Saturday. I'm getting exhausted. School be starting soon. I won't have to worry about the Saturday I can't get work. And then they started working every other day for me. But he came by with some pizza one day, and we were making these rectangular round transitions, and he was using geometry, trigonometry, and algebra. He may not know how it all came together, but he was taking a stick rule and he was measuring, he was pulling lines, and remember we took a picture of that.
Yep.
And he stayed, Tommy stayed with him. I went back to what I was doing, and Tommy stayed with him. And he got the same confirmation from Tommy as he had been getting from me. It takes a village to raise all our children, disability or not disability. So I left Tommy to talk to him and encourage him, and I went back to doing my part, because I needed to step away, and hopefully what I was speaking would be the same thoughts that would resonate in his mind by Tommy. And so it was a day for me that we're living in for me. And January the 11th.
So, Tyler, what is the mission of Southern Voices of the Coast, and what sets it apart from other agencies?
I think there's a lot of core values in terms of our agency, but in terms of our mission is to, one, give everyone the opportunity to live independently as possible. So everything that we do is kind of community living, supports community access, individual. And what I mean by that is it's promoting their independent living within a home setting, whether they live by themselves or with a family, as well as doing community access individual, what's called CAI and kind of DBHDD's terms here in the state, is what can we do kind of therapeutic direct to give them the opportunities to be inclusive. So we have a lot of community partnerships with Effingham artists. We have a lot of individuals that come to Faith Equestrian and have that opportunity, as well as we've got gyms down with Abilities Limited in Savannah, bowling leagues, and I know the Navigators do a ton of great work in terms of providing those outlets. And I think, from a company standpoint, it's helping, for me, I've had the opportunity to, I've learned more from the individuals that I've served throughout kind of my career and my life than, they probably learned from me. And I think that's an important message for, as a business owner in a company, to help share that that wealth of knowledge that I've gained to everyone else in our community, but also, to be a driver to give them the opportunity. We employ a young man that works for us as well in the office, as one of our admin assistants, and I was in leadership at Effingham about 2 years ago. As we were going to a lot of the business owners and learning kind of throughout the county, a lot of them employ people with, I don't like to necessarily use the word disabilities, but there was some form of accommodation that they needed, and now, me and Miss Pauline talk about this all the time. They're some of the best workers. They're going to show up at 8 every day.
Absolutely.
You know that they take a lot of pride to be there.
They don't want to disappoint you as their employer, but then they don't want to disappoint themselves. I mean, when this young man comes to work, I went on ahead and hired his brother too. I hired both of them, and totally different, but together they're an amazing duo. One is he dresses presidential. He's more administratively, and then the other one he's more the mechanical environment. It's just amazing that they're totally different in their mannerisms and just amazing. So to me, I think it's something that can be addressed, and I think it can be so small down the spectrum that most people wouldn't even notice it.
Well, and I think, we've got several in the political realm here is when you're looking at people that are doing, and they're on Medicaid, and they're getting, some form of assistance kind of from the government, right, because of the disability, and then yet they want to work more, but it's almost kind of punishing them on the back end because now they're making too much money, or it's now I want lower wages, but it's kind of devaluing their ability to work, and I think those are things that, as we move forward in this positive way, you've got a lot of great things happening. They're contributing to the workforce, and we talk a lot about shortage in workforce, but yet there's a ton of people that are looking for work, right? And
looking for that opportunity.
Yeah, and everyone looks past, right?
So why is community so important to the people you serve?
Why is community so important? I think for me it starts with my kids. I think for as a father, how can I be engaged in the community? My kids go to Blandford here in Effingham County, and Blandford has just transformed their education in a really positive way. As a business owner, how can I help give back to show? So I'm the president of Kiwanis now. I think I'm going in my third term here for Kiwanis here in Effingham, and for me, we do a lot of service, and everything we do at Kiwanis is youth-based, and we have a lot of community partners with other nonprofits, and we kind of help infuse where they maybe need more support with volunteers, or they need support with, like we do a big in the Christmas time with Ready to Connect and Action Pack. A lot of the individuals who have a need and lack of gifts, and even just not necessarily gifts, but essential needs during Christmas time, jackets, mittens, etc. And I think for me, being involved in the community is helping shape the lives of my kids. They actually get really excited to come volunteer. I don't even have to volunteer them anymore. They look forward to it. And Liam was excited to come with me today, and he's been pretty quiet over there, but he gets excited to also participate in every opportunity. And I think that that's what I want for my kids is to see all the great things that the county's doing, because I think it does get lost when a lot of kids nowadays are on social media and they're seeing all the negativity and the hate, but yet they're missing a lot of just going out and being kids, and then that's what I want my kids to be able to have the opportunity for.
Thank you. Just answered my next question.
Yeah.
So what are some ideas or goals that you would like to achieve here?
In terms of Effingham County, I think it's, again, more community partnerships. I'm very visionary, so I think for me it's how can I take this vision and make it a reality, right? I talked to Lindsay about Effingham Artists, and I was like, everything you're doing at the studio is great in Springfield. How can you go ahead and make the classes? We made this craftabilities class, and it's for individuals that want to learn artwork in Effingham County that maybe they get services, but we make it open for anyone, right? She has certain slots, and that from an availability standpoint. But I think taking some of what we're doing there and looking at Faith Equestrian, what can we do to help partner with Faith Equestrian and help strive more opportunities for individuals to get therapeutic services in the equestrian, and or, you know, because we are a fairly large employer, I think we were up to almost 140 employees, is, you know, giving the opportunities for our employees to also be involved in the community. So I think it's a twofold there, not only about who we serve, but also who we employ.
Right. Wow. So how can the community get more involved in supporting those you serve?
I think that, for, you know, in terms of getting more involved, I think it starts with conversations. I think that you know, we're quick to, especially in my kind of realm of work, I think it gets overlooked a lot of times. And you know, I think historically, I think Effingham County, in my experience, and you know, having kind of traveled a lot in Georgia with this type of work, is I think they set the gold standard. I really do. I think it's credit to the navigators and a lot of, you know, just what the local leaders have done here to really promote, as well as the school system, and inclusiveness. And I think that for when we talk about just engagement, is you know, for people to speak up, but also provide opportunity as well. And I think that starts with conversations, whether you're an employer, you're, you know, needing people in the workforce, etc., to reach out to those that are doing supportive employment. And I think from the nonprofit sector is, there's a lot of great nonprofits here in Effingham County. You and I have had this conversation over you know, lunches. No one knows who they are. I mean, even for me, I'm learning in my sector, and I feel like a lot of times I feel like a subject matter expert when I'm not. And you know, I think that keeps me humble of learning something new every day. I mean, even from Faith Equestrian, I understood what Faith Equestrian does. I knew individuals, but having Elizabeth take me on a tour here and really understand it in a much more intimate way helped kind of shape, you know, potential partnerships for us.
You know, I had an individual that owns a business here in Effingham, and he is always doing fundraisers for nonprofits. And we were sitting there in actually it was a parade committee meeting, and he said, I don't know where to find the nonprofits. And that just, I was just struck in awe. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's probably hundreds of other people out here. They just don't know where to go.
They don't know where to go.
And you know, I felt right then that was going to be one of our missions, was to help get these nonprofits some recognition and some exposure out there.
Yeah, I mean, I had recently, so I'm actually a sponsor with Effingham Victim Witness, a big golf tournament coming up here on the 26th, and we're actually excited because we have 3 teams, I think, and we actually have a team that's going to be a couple individuals who have never golfed before. And so you know, Miss Holly was putting that on. I said, hey, I might need some accommodation. They might end up just driving a golf cart, but we're going to make it work. And you know, someone asked me, why are you sponsoring that? And it was, you know, they were kind of taken back, like, well, you know, what you do, why would you be involved? And it's, well, you're forgetting kind of from a socio-demographic standpoint who we serve. You know, when you talk about kind of a Medicaid population for a lot of families or individuals, Victim Witness has done a lot of great work for individuals in crisis. I actually just talked to Holly recently where, you know, we had someone that was in a challenging situation in their home. They've got individuals with disabilities in there, and she was able to kind of get, not directly through her, but her community partners, to help that family. They were in a hotel with two individuals with disabilities, and we're able to kind of now get them stable housing. And you know, that was really just through connections, right? It was a domino effect. I knew someone, they knew someone, and within a day, we're now with a family getting them into a hotel.
And Tyler, if you know, the city of Lincoln, of course, you know, we sit over here in one corner of the county, but we've got some loving people and caring people on council. And I will tell you, anything that you guys need from us, just reach out. And I think that's what Tom and them do so well here, is bring people that need to be together. So we have a lot of space in the city of Lincoln, and as a leader, it's open to you guys. So
and I think that's an important message, because you know, you're talking about positivity, right? And we talked about this just with your show, Tommy. I think when you're seeing a lot of positive things and people doing positive acts, they're more likely to ask for help.
Yes.
When you're seeing a lot of negativity and hate and different things, why would I want to ask for help? Because there's a stigma to it, right? So, you know, if we're pushing, like when we talk about Effingham Talks, regardless of your political views or whatever it might be, we need to support everyone. Everyone needs to support. So what can we do to help? You know, and I love that you share everything, right? It doesn't matter who they are. If they're doing something good in the community, you want to show it. And I think that goes a long ways. And so. Yeah, and I appreciate for Rincon. I mean, we obviously support a lot of people within Rincon, and you know, there's always a need that you don't necessarily know you're going to come across, but you do.
That's it.
So, you hold a lot of seats other than owning the company, family, taking care of the family. So, what are some of these hats you wear? What are some of these offices you hold? And tell us about your nonprofits that you're involved
Yeah, so I mean, you know, obviously I'm heavily involved in, you know, within Southern Choice of the Coast, as well as a partner with Southern Choices LLC in Vidalia, and then I actually have another. We just opened a clinical division working with medically fragile, both kids and adults, in terms of nursing services. From the nonprofit world, so I've been the president of Kiwanis, and I kind of mentioned that. Now going on, this will be my 3rd year. And I think for all you in this table, it would be great to have you guys come to a meeting. We've got a judge as one of our members, as well as several leaders within the community and the nonprofit world. I've got a board of directors seat with Gossip, so that's the Georgia Community Care Provider Association within the state of Georgia. Kind of, you know, more with the private home care sector, and you know, we're helping work a lot with our, you know, kind of lobbyists and whatnot in terms of legislation that is changing within our sector of work. I've got a board of directors seat with the Grow Initiative. I think Miss Rosie was on this at one point with her talks, and I think for me it's you know, even Miss Elizabeth and I've been kind of having conversations within Faith Equestrian, and you know, there is a lot of, you know, I think for me that I would love to get as more involved as I possibly can, but I also know I can't wear every seat. But I also might know someone that might be a good person, and that's kind of what, you know, Elizabeth and I were talking about recently. And she was, you know, kind of expressing maybe some need, and I knew someone that was, you know, he's a Marine, and I think he might bring some value. And again, it's just through. I'm a big believer in networking. You know, just this is the first time I've met 3 of you gentlemen, and I think that's it. I'm already learning a lot, and again, it's there's a lot of work to be done. I think there's a lot of great things that have been done, though, and that's what I, you know, want to preach from the nonprofit world.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you here.
Yeah, I
And we see
appreciate it.
you making great strides.
I appreciate it.
And you know, that's things that are successful, like what he's doing. People want to get involved, and some people want to get involved just because they want to get their face next to something that's successful. And you know what? That's okay. I mean, you accept all. You know, servants, people that just want it, but what you're doing, it just sounds like to me, is just successful. Everything that you're touching, and people want to be a part of that. So, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. That's great.
Absolutely.
So we're going to move on to retired Lieutenant Colonel Brian Montgomery.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I am awesome. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me and allowing me to be here. And we had a short conversation about the show and Effingham Talks, and I think what you're doing here is spectacular.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. So, you are currently running for Congress.
Yes, sir. That's what they tell me.
So, well, congratulations. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share my background and introduce myself to the people in Effingham County, and gentlemen to you. It's a long story, but I'll give it to you in a short time frame.
Okay.
My life's been a journey. So, number one, I'm a father, I'm a husband. I've got 2 amazing kids, but my life has been about serving this nation. And it wasn't intentional. I didn't wake up one day and say, you know, hey, I'm going to spend the next 25 plus years of my life serving this nation. It was a calling. Didn't have the best start. Grew up in Atlanta, just north of Atlanta. I played a lot of baseball. I had a dream to play baseball in college. Unfortunately, I tore up my arm my senior year. Didn't get to continue to play baseball, but I went up to Indiana University. It's where my father went to school. I was born in Indianapolis. And the funny thing about going to college, when you kind of have something that's, you know, the definition of your discipline, your driving factor, something that keeps you busy and focused. And, you know, my mom always said, you know, if you don't get good grades, then you're not going out in the baseball diamond. So that was a real big driver for me. When I lost baseball and I went to college, I kind of lost my way. It wasn't a success story. In fact, it turns out when you go to college, they actually expect you to go to classes and learn.
Imagine that.
Yeah, they don't put that in the pamphlet. You know, they show all these
small words.
Yeah, it's the small writing.
Yeah.
And it was true the first time that I'd ever failed in my life. About halfway through the semester, I had to make the tough phone call to my parents and say, I'm not ready for this, and it's time for me to come home. So that in itself is a huge thing to realize, right? I came home, I worked for about a year as a mall security guard, and I waited tables at a restaurant. And one day, I was driving an errand. We had 2 restaurant locations. One was up in Alpharetta, and the other one was down in Buckhead. And I was driving down Roswell Road, and I stopped at a stoplight, and right there in the little, strip mall area was an Army recruiting station. And to this day, gentlemen, I cannot tell you why I pulled into that parking lot and walked through those doors, but I did. It was the strongest pulling I've ever felt in my life. And I was every recruiter's dream. Somewhat physically fit young man walks in. I point to the Airborne Ranger poster on the wall, and I said, "That's what I want to do." And 3 weeks later, I left for basic training. Didn't know much about the Army, but I knew that something was calling me in this direction, right? And I truly believe that God has a plan, right? But what's incredible about it is He gives you the option, right? He gives you the choice. And kind of as I introduce myself to you, what you're going to see is my life has been a series of opportunities because of who I am as a person, and those opportunities have led to doors opening. But it's still whether or not we walk through those doors.
That's right. So.
And so I joined the Army. Incredible opportunity. I went to my first duty station to Hawaii. I know you, Kevin, we were talking, you tried to get out to Hawaii.
Yeah, great.
They asked if I wanted to go to Fort Benning, Georgia, or Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. And listen, I love Georgia.
Right.
Hawaii down for me. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go try that for a couple years. And while I was out in Hawaii, my battalion commander, he saw something in me. I was giving him a report. We were actually in Louisiana at a training event. I came in to give him a report, and he said, "Brian, you got a lot of potential," or Specialist Montgomery, you have a lot of potential. I'm going to send you to Western. Kind of going back, I didn't know what West Point was. I truly didn't.
Right.
But I knew enough to go find a lieutenant because those guys went to West Point. And, I walked out and I found the first lieutenant. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, the boss just said he wants to send me to West Point." And he goes, "Did you really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "What are the parties like at West Point?" And luckily, he sat me down and said, "You have a real opportunity here to change your life." And so I found the right lieutenant. He talked me through the opportunity. Once we got back out to Hawaii after this training event, I called my parents and I asked my dad, and I said, "There may be an opportunity for me to go to West Point. Is that something I should look into, Dad?" And he was like, "Yes, son. That's something that you should really look into." So, had a phenomenal time at West Point. One of the great things about that institution is not only they teach you leadership and responsibility, but kind of like the same discussion point of the theme we've been discussing here is every cadet out there has about 5 to 7 people that work at West Point that are solely dedicated to their success and their growth and their development. And so when we talk about community, right, there's no better example than a world-renowned leadership institution. But it's that way because of the people that are there, the passion that they have for developing others, and really putting that effort into each person that graduates from there. And I'm a success story from that. I graduated. I tell people, I got into West Point through the doggy door. Somebody forgot to slide down on that. And then I tell them I went to school for 5 years because I had to go to the prep school transitioning from active duty military being enlisted to going to West Point. And I tell them I went to school for 5 years. I didn't get any smarter. I went right back into the infantry. Because that's really what I wanted to do. And I served the first half of my career at the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Deployed twice to Iraq in that time frame. Once to Haiti. We were supposed to deploy to Afghanistan, and the earthquake in 2010 happened in Haiti. We were on the Strategic Response Force, and so when the president calls, we went down there to support that. We were on the ground 48, 72 hours after the earthquake, and just talking about disaster situation. It was insane. Then made a transition. The second half of my career I spent right here at Fort Stewart. I'm pretty unique, Kevin. We were talking at the beginning. You said, I know you've served all over. I'm unique in the fact that I've really only been in 2 locations.
That's great.
Yeah, so I served in the 82nd as a platoon leader, and then my battalion commander came back as a brigade commander and said, "Brian, I want you to come back to the 82nd and be a company commander for me." And then came down here to Fort Stewart, served as an executive officer for the best battalion in the United States Army, the most historical, the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Battalion. And left there to go do a broadening assignment, and then immediately got brought back to command at the time. So
That's nice.
yeah, it's been an absolutely incredible experience. We've been here for almost 10 years. So we became the Fort Stewart in 2016, moved to Savannah, and knew that we had found home. Just, you know, the community, the love, the incredible resources here,
Yes.
and, you know, it's just beautiful to be on the coastline. So yeah, that's kind of my story. In between there, I got to do some pretty incredible things. My second deployment to Iraq, I was selected to come up and work on General Petraeus' personal staff during the surge. So that was an incredible experience for a young man to see, you know, this,
Yeah.
you know, briefing heads of states, preparing talking points for congressional delegations, and then help them prepare for the 2008 testimony where we had to come home and tell the American people the success and the storylines that our soldiers were having in Iraq. So absolutely a phenomenal opportunity. Selected to go back to teach leadership at West Point. So that was one of my main goals is, you know, I had so many people taking care of me. One of my career goals was to return back to West Point to do that exact same for the future generation of leaders in our nation. And so I had the opportunity to do that. And then lastly, I got selected to be the professor of military science at Georgia Southern University. Led the ROTC program for about 2.5 years during COVID, which is its own unique circumstance. You know, trying to help corral and influence and train college students is one thing. Doing that during COVID was an absolutely different challenge. So throughout my life has been, you know, about service to the nation, about helping the next generation. And so when you called and asked me to come on, you know, absolutely want to continue to tell that story.
Yes, that is amazing.
That is, and every one of those doors that you were talking about has led you to exactly where you are right now. And what you're going to do. I mean, that's
There's a
incredible.
purpose.
That-
There's a purpose.
And you were trained all the way up. I mean, you go back to your briefings and things like that, and being a part of that, and being comfortable with that, because a lot of people's not comfortable with that.
Yes, sir.
And now you've got that under your belt. So, I mean, what a better next step for you.
Absolutely. I'm going to say, listening to your story and taking note, you know, everything starts with all of us having some failures. You know, without some failure, there's no success, right? And I always tell people, success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal. It's when you deliberately choose to do something. Each one of us who are being telecast are a success. And then there's some here that's not on the telecast that is around us, deliberately made the decision to be an impactor. From Frank and Tommy creating Effingham Talks, believe it or not, they too, behind the scenes, as being one of their closest friends, have had some challenges and had some setbacks. Will culminate, if you would say, to a little bit of failing, but through patience, listening. They then too, we are the benefit of their servant, both Frank and Tommy. Frank's the guy that, you know, he's I always say, this is the visionary, but without the integrator, the discipline, the holding back, to give them structure. Frank's that integrator. He's that hold the brakes. You know, this is what we got to do. And on the outside looking in, truly, they are a success story. Just like Miss Pauline and Miss Elizabeth. You know, we all deliberately want to impact, and we learn from our failures. Kevin, earlier you mentioned about you know, finding the good now where you was a little critical. You know, but just listening to your story, because you failed in college and you ain't quite getting it together, and all of a sudden here comes this impact in Hawaii that slowed down long enough to not only reach out, but he must have reached down for many days and encouraged you, not in just one word, and then put you on a trajectory to be where you're at. He must have had to take the grinder to get the edges before he could help polish you, right? And now you have even more opportunity to be a servant. And you're not on the sidelines. You're willing to serve your people. And that's what we're all about. Every last one of us in this room are a success because we deliberately each day push back our disappointments and our discouragement to not only reach out like that man did for you, just like you're doing today, Kevin, but not only reach out, sometimes it takes a few more minutes to reach down and pick that individual up. I like to commend you for your service and what your plans are. And I'm going to give you a little bit of Army Air Corps advice.
Okay.
Dates back to March of 1942. It was when 16 bombers were going to fly off the USS Hornet for a one-way ticket, one-way route to Japan. Just like today, America's resolve is being questioned here in our state and in the world. Our resolve as a body of people. But you see, America's days, our best days aren't behind us, our best days are ahead of us. So I'm going to give you this quote by the man who commanded the raid to Japan, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle. Most of the young people do not know this name. But if there was ever an opportunity that America's resolve was being questioned in that generation went from an outhouse to outer space. I always say that was the most amazing generation. My father was from that generation. He passed away when I was a little boy. And I always amazed how they rallied our country. And now we have that same position again. We're back at that impasse to take America forward or backwards. I think words mean a lot. We're no longer the Department of Defense, we're the Department of War. And that the wording of that means that we are positively moving forward. We don't need to be in defense, we need to be in offense. And we, as Jimmy Doolittle said in March of 1942, the American resolve was being questioned. We had lost to the surprise attack at Pearl. We went on to Midway, Guam, the Philippines. And just like today, America's resolve is being questioned. But he said today, victory comes to the ones of us who believes in it the most, but believes in it the longest. I, for one, I'm just a simple but I live on the road, and I named it Victory Lane. And that's where I live, that's where I run my business, because in my own life, victory comes to the ones of us who believes in it the most, but believes in it the longest. So come visit me at 105 Victory Lane. That's where I live. And so let's all, as we leave, let's remember our servant's heart. And let's remember failing. Failing is not bad.
I think it's, I've had an opportunity to interact with a lot of young, men and women, and I think the challenge is everything that they see and they're bombarded with, right? They expect that success is immediate, and they think it's, it just happens. And so I try to take a lot of time, I think everybody's seen those drawings where people assume success looks like this straight line path, right? And then you see the squiggly one and all the ups and downs until you finally get here. But I think too often now, our young men and women, they face that first obstacle and challenge, and it's insurmountable, right? They don't understand how to overcome it. But really what helps them through that is community, is having the community. You said it takes a village, right? It does that. We're not alone in the military. You have a platoon for a reason. You have a squad for a reason. You have your church for a reason, right? To continue to bring in and have people around you to tell you it's going to be okay, to be there with you, and God's with us through that. But the most important thing, like Andy, when you were telling your story about the young man that you hired, that was probably a risk to that young man. But you provided an environment and an opportunity where he felt love and care and support. And when you do that, then people tend to work harder to take on those challenges and overcome those. And so when you're looking at things like Effingham Talks and sharing all these stories, I truly believe our communities are the things that have been lost. And that when we come together, when we used to break bread together, we used to have picnics and events that occurred. That's when everybody got to know each other and support each other. And I think that loss of community has really harmed us through the impact of social media. Like we were I'm speaking about. But it's more that we can get together and communicate with each other and then support each other through these obstacles. What they're going to learn is that this isn't the end of life. This is life.
Yeah.
And then you continue to work through those things, and it only makes you better through those challenges.
Yeah, and coming from my standpoint, we look up to guys like you to be able to carry that torch, to carry that grassroots, because
right.
we're down here with our sleeves rolled up, doing everything we can do. And, it's nice to know that we're actually putting people in office that believe in what we believe in, that have rolled up their sleeves before and done that work and can understand, local leadership, and that's the most important thing. It's funny, someone asked me not too long ago, and it was a politician that's looking for a spot higher up, and he said, I want your support, but I want you to tell me what keeps you up at night. I said, well, traffic keeps me up at night. I said, because I know every morning if I get up and I don't leave my house by 6:15 for an 8 o'clock job, I'm going to be late. And my wife the same way. And he said, well, how can I help with that? I said, well, you hold the purse strings. You guys have those meetings in places where I can't. I can raise my hand and scream down here, but the bad thing is the local guys are the ones that's getting beat over the head over it. Our county commissioners, our local politicians, our council members and all, man, y'all are letting all these warehouses in and you're doing all this and traffic's terrible, we got to change politicians locally. And the reality is we don't have a finger on that. So I think it's important to get people up there like you that has gotten dirty, that understands, what the needs are in the community. You've been here long enough to see this community change. You know what it needs, and the more people we get up like that in those positions, the better off we are.
Absolutely.
I think just with what he said about the community aspect, I saw a beautiful moment this past Saturday. So my son's actually through YMCA at Rinkin, he's over there, but he was playing soccer, and they do a prayer before they line up both teams. They do a prayer. Well, they picked an individual. Well, on this team, they have an individual with disability. He did the prayer, and then they all clapped. And just the power of that, not only for the teams and kind of promoting him to have the courage to do it.
Yep.
You've got the support then with the families there, and I think just that aspect of it's a simple thing that goes a really long ways. For one, the youth as well as everyone around at
And
that
you know how
match.
hard it is for a young man, even an adult, to have the courage to get up and pray, or to get up and say something. I mean, even to sit behind this microphone. Probably the first time you did it, your hands were pouring sweat. And you know what I mean? So it's tough. And just like leading a meeting in the city of Lincoln, I used to think, oh, this is an easy job. The mayor's got an easy, Mayor Lee's got an easy job. And then I got there, and I was like, oh my gosh, I wish he was sitting beside me to help me with this, And
You set the tone and pace.
And that's what it is. And you think about it. But the more that we do things like that as a community and allow people to speak and do those things, the better off we are. The more courage people are going to have to do those things, and that's important. That's huge.
So, being in the service, what was it like after 9/11?
Yeah, so last week was a tough week, right? We've spoken about Charlie and the impact and the threat to our First Amendment rights. But I truly believe that Charlie's voice is only going to get louder after the events that occurred last week. But last week was also the 24th anniversary of 9/11. And I was in school. I was a sophomore at West Point. And I can tell you exactly where I was, minute by minute, how we saw it. And we're only about 50 miles north of New York City. That's in our backyard. So I could tell you the range of emotions that went through that, but the story I want to tell is about my West Point class. So when we showed up, you go through the initial summer training, and then the day that you come back is called reception day. It's when you're received into the Corps of Cadets. And the old saying used to be, if it rains on your R day, you're going to war. And it poured. In fact, in our class crest, we have a cloud with a lightning bolt to represent that day. And listen, in the summer of 2000, we were in Bosnia and a couple other places, but the world was pretty much at peace and didn't think anything of it. And then September 11, 2001 happened. And the impact that had, to be honest with you, I was ready to leave school and go back and enlist and fight because I knew we were going to war. But I had really good friends that said, know you're at the right place where you need to be right now.
Right.
This is going
Finish it up.
finish it up, right? You're going to have more of an ability and impact to be able to lead, right? But the great thing about that is our class was the first one to affirm our oath after 9/11. And think about what that means, right? Because a lot of these young men and women came into the academy understanding what we were raising our hand to do, but there wasn't a real threat.
That's right.
But when that threat occurred, we didn't lose but 1 to 2 people from our class. And that class continued to move on. And listen, we graduated in 2004, went through our training. So 2005, 6, 7, the most critical elements of Afghanistan and Iraq, that was us. I lost 23 classmates since we graduated. 13 in combat, 6 to suicide, and then 4 others in training events getting prepared to go to combat. That's the most of any West Point class since the class of 1966 in the Vietnam War.
Wow.
Our motto is for country and core. And so when you look at everything that our class has done for this country, it's just an impactful moment, right? So last week was a little rough. I took a couple of days, especially after Charlie, and then just on the phone with people I knew that were close to Charlie or was impacted by his death, and then also talking to my classmates and closest friends to remember what 9/11 did to the world, but only to the world, but all those lives of my classmates that continue to serve. And so when you experience that, when you serve the nation, when you know what it means to serve and sacrifice, it kind of leads to how I got here, which is, I have 3 classmates currently serving in Congress right now. And when Buddy made the announcement that he was going to run for Senate, my friend called me that I've known for 25 years. We were roommates at the prep school. He called me the day after, and he said, "Brian, I don't care what you're doing. I really don't. But Buddy's made an announcement he's running for Senate, and you're going to get in this race. Because we need you to come up here and fight with us and support the president and do what's right for this country. And I don't care what you're doing." And listen, throughout my life, whether the president asks you or, your boss asks you, when somebody asks you to serve for this nation and continue serving, it's not a conference call. I don't go to the committee and say, "Okay, guys, what do you think about this?" You do it.
That's right.
And so talking to the family and having those conversations about what this looks like, because this is hard. There's a lot of risk out there. There's a lot of negativity in the world right now.
Absolutely.
And jumping into this is not an easy decision, because I've put myself, I've put my family, and all those that have known me into the public eye now. That's tough.
Yep.
But when you're on a calling, no matter what, you're going to have the courage. And people say, "Are you crazy?" There's a thin line between crazy and courage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then people always ask me, "Well, why now? It's so nasty right now." And I'll tell you what, gentlemen, out of anything that the military has taught me, there's no such thing as perfect conditions. You either get in the fight or you don't.
That's right.
And no matter how bad it is, I truly believe that the impact that I can have for this district, for this state, and this nation, that I'm absolutely the right guy to help change that.
And a good analogy to that is when I was going through cancer treatments, I had to wake up every day and go down there to do radiation, knowing that it was going to punch me in the face every day. And that's what you're doing. You got a great life. Everything's going smooth in your life, kid, and then all of a sudden you get that phone call. And now you have to wake up every day and get punched in the face. You put yourself right back in the line of fire. And that's what leaders do. That's impressive. And when I was going down there, that's all I could think about was, man, I know when I leave there, I'm going to be sick in the parking lot. But you're counting it off every day for your kids. This is my 20th radiation. I got 15 more to go, and you're just taking those chips off the refrigerator, and that says a lot for who you are.
Appreciate it.
So, and I guess that's your inspiration for running for office was the phone call?
The phone call's great, right? And ask to serve, but when you're having a conversation with your family, you're assessing this, right?
Yeah.
Make sure, because it's not just me, it's your family. I told the story. After 20 years of service, deployments, training events. I love my children. I like to spend every moment I possibly can with them. But after I got out of the service, I got to spend more. I got to cook breakfast for them, right? And be there and drive them to school and talk to them. It was really funny one night I came home and I said, said, Carrie, our kids are pretty cool. Like, they're awesome. But when these phone calls come up, right, and I think about our kids, my kids, your kids, grandkids, I started thinking, like, there's a real opportunity that when I leave this earth, I may leave it in a worse condition than when I came onto it. And when I look at my children, that's unacceptable. And so I've already spent serving this nation, for my kids. If I can continue to serve to ensure that we have the ability to, our constitutional rights and uphold those, fight for our district and our state. And when I do leave this earth, I'm leaving in a better spot than when I came on. That's our entire goal, is to do that for our children. I mean, that's a baseline, number one reason why to do it. But I have the experiences and the opportunities to take that to the federal government, to work with our local leaders, to speak to the people and communicate and share their stories and come up and lead at the national level. If I can make the impact and those change while also being a further example to my children of what love, passion, sacrifice, commitment, and being a servant looks like, then to me that's an easy answer. And that's why I'm here. It's for my kids and your kids and our nation. We are the greatest nation on earth.
And you pass the torch to another servant.
Yes, sir.
You build them. You're building them at home. So that's amazing.
Give them a goal to reach for.
That's right.
Yeah, set the bar.
So,
If the bar's there, you set it higher.
that's right.
And then the next one sets it higher.
That's right.
And it's limitless how far you can go as a nation.
But it starts here with shows like this and conversations like this, right? We talk about it over and over again. The example that you're providing, example that you provide, those are the examples that people have to see no matter what level they're at. And that's what's going to continue us on the path.
Well, I think what you're saying, and I love what you're saying, because it's not only about, yes, what you can do at the federal level in Washington, D.C., but it's also those simple conversations at a local level, right? And I think that gets lost. I think it does. And we talk about like the YMCA to, being a major stakeholder in a decision with a legislative change, right? Both are equally as important, and I think that's where we gotta get back to the roots. And I like what you're having to say. I mean, I only wish you the best, and you're running here, and I am a firm believer, right? Those simple things that are happening in the community are just as big as what's happening in DC, and it's bilateral.
Yeah. And Tyler, you think about what, when you start looking at people, because our job as local leaders are to go out and find other good leaders that you want to bring into the political realm, And I sit back and I look at people like Tyler and I think, oh man, he would be great on council. You know what I mean? But then you jog in your head, you go, yeah, but I'm gonna lose him on like 6 different boards that impact our community, because Tyler hadn't gotten out there to be able to build those people yet. So, when you say, hey, I'm ready to move up, hopefully you've got your number 2. I tell people that all the time. I say, look here, how can your number 2 not be number 1 if something happens to you? So it's important that you build that, because Tyler, one day somebody's gonna look at you and they're gonna say, man, you need to be here because you're really strong. You gotta have that backfield so that you can move, because people will look at you when they listen to this and they hear it, they're gonna say, man, that guy right there should run for office, because we need him on that level. We need that mental health, that knowledge that he's got, the education that he's got to be able to talk to people, but then you don't want to lose him on the board.
Right. You have different layers of the community.
That's
And
right.
not everybody can be a leader to help make their community successful. But there's something somewhere on each of those layers that everybody can contribute to
That's right.
to make their community better.
That's right. That's what you're doing right here. It's the Effingham Talks. The equestrian center right here. There's just so many things that people are doing that make it spin.
Well, that's part of the reason why we started it. We said, hey, we all can't be leadership roles. There's just not enough leadership roles.
Right.
So why get involved in all that when we can take this show and help make our community better? This is something we can do.
That's right.
And we don't have to worry about running every 4 years for this.
Yeah.
We can do this hopefully forever.
Yeah. And Tommy, it's accountability.
Yeah.
You guys provide accountability to the community, and that's what needs to happen here. That's what the community is lacking. You're doing more here by introducing everybody than you would if you were in a seat.
Exactly.
For 4 years. You're doing more here, and you can continue to do this. And that's why it's important.
Well, I think you talk about just, we're talking a lot about leading the youth, and you talked about the, earning money, right? It is the boots on the ground that gets lost, right? For me, being in the younger generation, I was in kind of a, corporate world, before I branched off, and it was, I was very fortunate kind of in my career between very few jobs. I moved up quickly. I was motivated. I was hungry. And, for me, it was, how can I have more responsibility and take on that? But, at the same point, you're going against people, maybe it's a Harvard grad, and now I'm getting overlooked by my passion, my hard work, and my drive, but I want to be a motivator for other people. And same thing for you. You're going through the service and what it took to persevere to get to the point that you're at now, with all the accolades, right? And it wasn't easy. It was through hard work. And, I think, yes, there's a lot of opportunities to be that leader, but at the same point, you're making bigger impacts by just being a good person and providing that service.
That's
and
right.
I think that's what I'm all about.
But people like the two of us have to listen. We have to listen to you guys. We have to listen to you, the people that are boots on the ground. We have to listen. And then we have to do everything that we can do to make sure that we provide the impact that you're looking for.
Yeah.
That you're working.
We are all pieces of
the
puzzle.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. Miss Pauline Shaw always reminds us of that.
Yeah.
We're all pieces of the puzzle.
And-
And she's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't say it any better than that. We're all a piece of the
That's
puzzle.
right. And I'll tell you, last thing, you changing things, you've changed jobs, you've done all that, and it's been, one of the biggest things for me is, I grew up as a coach. So you talk about baseball, I was a coach, and 6 of my boys that I coached from 9U to 14U are now playing college baseball. My son being one, and then I moved over to the girls, started coaching my daughter. And now my daughter just decided after she was offered a scholarship that I don't want to play ball anymore because there's no path into the majors. There's no money to be made. So she's that girl. And so anyway, I stepped away from it for a while and decided I wasn't going to coach. And got so sick of not being around those kids that I went and took a test, became a Georgia high school umpire. So now I travel, and I'm standing out on the field the other day in McIntosh County, and I'm looking at kids doing things, and I'm thinking, gosh, I wish I could sit back and talk to them.
Yeah.
So I go over there to the side, and this girl said, yeah, you were I seen you talk to my daughter out there. What was you telling her? And I said, well, I was telling her she got to be a glove on the ground. And she got to keep her head on the ball. And she said, what's your background? And I told her I had an academy. And she said, you know what? She said, I think you need to come up here an hour early, and I'll have you some girls that you can instruct. And so in my head, then I started bouncing around, and I called my friend, and I said, Mona Underwood. I called Miss Mona, and I said, on my way back, I said, Mona, I don't think my calling was an umpire. I said, I really think I need to get back into hands-on with the kids.
Training.
And, but it's amazing how you just continue to serve. You can't get away from that. It's $50 that pays you to go to McIntosh, and you're like, gosh, I spent $75 going down there, and then but you got to be around those kids, and that's what was important.
I think after September 11th, the thing that strikes me the most is the unity of this country. Like, no matter where you drove, where you went, there's American flags, but people were talking to each other again, right? And I think when we experienced 9/11, the 2 decades of conflict after that, we say never forget, but I think unfortunately we're starting to forget what that was like. And so understanding and never forgetting about 9/11 and understanding the impact it had on us as a nation to drive us together. I mean, I still used to drive around New York, right? In every small town, and every small town along the road, every business had an American flag out.
Yes.
You drove down, I would drive back home to Atlanta, right? All down 95, there were flags on the overpasses. When you pulled off to get gas, there were flags everywhere.
That's right.
You don't see that anymore.
Mm-mm. And it wasn't about affiliation.
Until I turned off of Jimmy DeLoach and started coming back down here to Effingham County, I started seeing American flags
That's
everywhere.
right. That's right.
But we need to get back to that. And I think the events of this past week with Charlie Kirk is really bringing that back in this perspective. And that we need to have those conversations again. We need to have confidence and faith in this as our nation, because we are the greatest nation. We need to demonstrate.
Absolutely.
We need to demonstrate, but we demonstrate it by our actions every single day. Our interactions with our youth, how we run our businesses, how we serve our time outside of work and earning our money, but also providing it to all those nonprofits, and how you have talk shows like this. But we've got to get back to that.
A house divided cannot stand.
It cannot.
Wow, that's big.
Well, and I think I appreciate you guys with Effingham Talks just really promoting that positivity, because we talk about social media and we haven't touched on a lot of it, but just for my youth growing up, as well as for you guys as well, seeing these messages as it's going out on podcasts through Facebook, and seeing it as a platform to help shape kind of what is the message that's being spread, and I think that you guys are having a positive impact. So I was excited to enjoy this, be on this show, as well as for each of you, and and again, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I do think the greatest kind of with our nation is ahead of us, and I think that's where we need to keep pushing.
I believe, Brian, through it all, I think you're going to be able to stand on your merit. Well, whoever endorses you, I believe, and Buddy Carter endorses you.
No, sir, and I've spoken to Buddy a couple times. He's a great guy. And the last time I had a conversation was right after the floodings in Texas. And so the focus wasn't on politics; it was about his family and ensuring that they were doing okay.
I must say, I believe you're going to be able to stand on your merits, and stand on who you become. Yeah, you had an opportunity, you grabbed that opportunity, and you have sounded your people, and you have charged that here. I admire that, and I admire that you brought our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ right along with you, that you didn't forget the most important part. So, I don't know who in the political arena may or may not endorse you, but you stand on your merits. You stand on what made you this great America. One of our biggest institutions. I got a friend of mine, son, that soon to graduate from West Point. They live in Silverwood. He would love to be able to listen to you, because he's a listener. His mom and dad had an amazing company where they employed many people, and a company that how we all made it through the recession back in those days, where our cash flow was measured by an EKG machine. It wasn't a heart machine that was the cash flow; it was either up, down, or flat line. And they impact so many people, and their grandson, not their son, their grandson will soon graduate from West Point, which is carving out, molding out America's future. So we commend you for your service, and you stand on your merits, you stand on your convictions. You've mentioned courage, the courage to step out into this arena. I always tell people there's an opposite for every word, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I believe the opposite of courage is not cowardice. I believe it's conformity. I believe it's when we conform to the status quo. When we say, what, I'm going to be complacent, and I'm not going to have the boldness and the courage to stand up and say, what, America's best years are ahead.
Brian, I'm sorry.
America's best years are ahead because of what? You're given the opportunity to instruct our greatest generation that comes behind us, your children. Let's remember, we're in leadership for a limited time. And what are we doing for our young people? I believe we got some of the greatest young people coming up in America. And I'm going to be the minority report. All this, well, our kids are this and our kids are that. I'm going to say, no, that's the minority report. Let me tell you about our kids. And I've never been a parent, but I've been given the most important title of being an uncle. And I've taken my uncleship. I wanted it to mean more than just this word. And then, the icing on the cake is when I see young people who they believe that I got something cool to offer, and they can earn some money. How awesome is that?
Well, I was going to tell you, Brian, that I got into politics Never thought I'd ever be in politics because I thought my mouth was too big. And but I had a little girl that played on my team, and there's a neighborhood in Rankin that didn't have a exit out. And so coming home one night from a tournament in Waycross, I went to drop her off at her mom's, and her mom couldn't get out the neighborhood, and I couldn't get in the neighborhood because there was a train blocking the entrance. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just ask some people, do a little research on it and find out why this entrance is blocked. She had to go to my house and did some research on it, and I seen where every 4 years they come around, that was the most important thing on the agenda, only to find its way to the bottom of the list after the election. And I thought, I got to figure out a way to get this to the top. And somebody said, well, if you want to run for office, if you want to change it, I ran for office. Well, of course, when you don't have the vote, you're not successful. So my first stint on council, couldn't get there. Then all of a sudden, I just kept fighting for it, got back in there on council again through a special election. The money was there. We got it. I rode by it for the first time on the McCall Road side and seen that exit coming through there. And I said, if I do nothing else in life, I ran on something. That's why I ran, and I completed it. So this, in the next couple months, that road, that emergency exit will be completed, and nobody in that neighborhood will ever be separated from their family ever again. And it was. I turned my fight into a fight for council, and I got council on board with it. And then there was times where they were calling me, going, "Kevin, we got to push, keep pushing." And I thought, man, I've done the right thing. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, we got it approved. And the devil was working so hard against us. The person that had the property that we were trying to get the easement for, he passed away. All the paperwork went into Fulton County, where you know how things bogged down in Atlanta. So everything was bogged down in the courts. We couldn't get the easement because they couldn't get the process through magistrate court to be able to get the approval so somebody could sign it. And so we fought that, finally got to the end of it. And I remember telling our city attorney, I said, I don't care what you got to do. I don't care if you got to drive to Fulton County. I said, this needs to end now. A week later, he called me and said, Kevin, we got the signature on the easement. And I said, let's start on it. So we put it out to bid and immediately started on it, and here we are, So it's crazy sometimes why you run. But, you have to run because you believe in something. And that's why I ran, because I believed I could make a difference in those people in that neighborhood. And you know what? It don't matter if I get one single vote out of that neighborhood as far as running. I know I did the right thing.
It is a crossroad that if a train stops, there is no ambulance coming to save you. Yeah. That was an oversight. Mm-hmm. But it's an amazing crossover that I've always scratched my head. How do those people get out?
Brian, I got one more question for you. What is your vision for First District?
I appreciate that. We're sitting here having a conversation. I'm engaged in here. Thanks for bringing me back to the question.
Yeah.
The First District is absolutely amazing. Every time somebody asks me that question, I get excited, right? Because when you look at what we've been blessed with inside the district, and I'm going to start with military. That's my background, right? So we have Hunter Army Airfield, Fort Stewart, Naval Submarine Base, Keatings Bay. We have our federal training, law enforcement training agency. Mm-hmm. When you look at what the president has attempted to do, in the short term that he's been back for his second term, he is focused on bringing back our national defense. And you brought up we are a Department of War, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. And bringing back our defense. And listen, there's no better place to do that than right here in the First District. We are the force projection platform for the East Coast and our national defense. We have nuclear submarines as part of our nuclear trident in strategic defense of our nation down at Kings Bay and Brunswick. Mm-hmm. We are critical to the defense of this nation. Absolutely. And so maintaining that, ensuring that those soldiers get absolutely everything they need and the resources they do, and then ensuring that those bases stay the way that they are because of the jobs and the impact that they have here in the district. But also there's 65,000 veterans in our district. Oh, wow. That choose to reside here.
That's a lot.
Wow. It's important that not only when they're done serving, but continue to provide them the services that they require, whether it's mental health services or basic health services. Yes. Our veterans deserve that from us. Not because they were owed it, it's because they earned it, right, Andy? They earned it
That's
through
right,
their
they
service.
earned it.
So that, I mean, that's just national defense. I can get excited. I'm about to jump out of my seat right now just talking about that.
Go, bro.
But then we talk about our economic powerhouse, which is our ports and our industries, right? And what we do for the nation when it comes to exporting our goods and letting the world know how great we are, and then also importing the goods that drive the supply chain for our companies. Like, that's a powerhouse, second largest on the East Coast, first in container volume coming through. And guess what? We have the opportunity to continue to provide that through our nation and through our leaders here in Savannah. That is an economic powerhouse. We're only the future of driving the economy for the nation here. And then last but definitely not least is our agriculture, right? And our agriculture, our producers, our farmers, our timber industries. I'm waiting for an article to get published because I wrote about the impact of the paper mills closing, right? And not only what that has for those 1,100 people that have lost their jobs, but the downtrace of that. You know, our truckers, our industries, our land values, our timber industry, our utility usage, you know, those are all going to have an impact across our district and those counties that rely on that income from those taxes and those property values. Like, that's a huge impact. And so the ability, a nation that doesn't feed itself or can't feed itself is doomed to failure, right? Being able to feed yourself and supporting our farmers and our producers is critically important. And we've got the best in the nation right here in Georgia, and especially in the 1st District. So the support to them and providing them support, when you look at all those things that the 1st District is blessed with, national defense, jobs, economy driving, and then our farmers that, you know, have cultures that we all aspire to be, right? When it talks about loving the nation and hard work. Like, that's an absolute opportunity to be able to bring that together and continue that success for the district and the state of Georgia and the nation while building the, you know, I talked about it, the only way you do that is you continue to build the communities. And so a community that fosters together. When you talk about vision, and vision is so critically important because people have to see it, right? They have to aspire to, you've got to share that vision and bring people along with that. But can you imagine a district that is just securing the nation, driving the economy and jobs, feeding the nation, and being an example of what community service looks like, right? Too often, I think the federal government tries to pull that community service up, right? My dad once told me, he's like, I'm a charitable guy, but I don't want the government to tell me where my money should go. I want to be able to decide that for my church community with the local leaders.
Right.
And so, like, if we can get back to that as a district, be a leader for the nation of what conversations look like, but supporting our neighbors, taking care of those in need, like, we can be the example for the rest of the nation of what a strong nation looks like. That's my vision for the 1st District.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, we certainly wish you the best of luck on
I
this
appreciate
endeavor. And thank you so much for coming on. Thank all of y'all for coming on. Before we wrap up, I'd like to remind everybody out there about October 4th, Boots and Barbecue right here at Faith Equestrian. You can go to their Facebook page, scan their QR code, go to their website, get your tickets, get your table. It's for a great cause. And again, I want to thank everybody for coming on. I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.